Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Intel drops the new bargain SSD champ. Kaby Lake CPUs are here. Huawei's Mate 8 eye tracking monitors and a 17-pound gaming laptop. All that and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 379, recorded September 1st, 2016. A new bargain SSD champ. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door, anywhere in the world, using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Go to ring.com/Twitch and get up to $150 off a Ring of Security kit with their limited time offer. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by iFixit, introducing the all-new ProTech Toolkit to give you the compact and complete toolkit for all things DIY. For $5 off your purchase of $10 or more, go to iFixit.com/Twitch and enter the code TWICH at checkout. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, the most informative, most engaging, most delightful, and yes, most economical hardware advice and mobile advice, except, of course, when we tell you to spend all the money. Speaking of which, if you have storage urges, Mr. Allyn Malventano is joining us today from beautiful Florence, Kentucky. Mr. Malventano, how are you?
I'm doing good. What's up?
I'm trying to decide if I'm more excited about the whole idea of Intel dropping a low-cost NVMe drive, or if I'm more excited about the Halo keyboard in the new Lenovo's new Yoga Book 2-in-1 tablet. What's got you more up?
I saw that tablet at CES. It's definitely a pretty cool idea, but it's like, and I was saying this on the podcast last night, it's like it's so close to that like utopian thing where just the thing just has screens everywhere and you can just write on all of them, but it's not there, right? It's like, okay, well, this side is just either a backlit pattern that gives you a keyboard, or it's a Wacom tablet. And that picture right there is actually very deceiving. They have a piece of paper on top of the Wacom tablet, and they're writing on it. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you might think that that's like some kind of awesome e-paper screen or something.
Well,
but it's
what it is
it's
doing.
not. It's just a sheet of paper.
Well, it's a sheet of paper, but the idea is that you can be writing on the sheet of paper and capturing all that information. Now, my handwriting is so atrocious, I would never try to OCR it in any meaningful fashion. But I was surprised at how good the Halo keyboard. I'm a touch typist. I'm irritated by keyboards that don't function well, and I was really fascinated because this thing is it's an Atom-powered device. They're doing Android and Intel versions of it, like $450 or $500, depending on which version of it you go for. And I'm really curious to actually see what the final version of it feels like. But I was shocked at how easy it was to type on this thing, right? Because it's literally a glass sheet, with the little outlines for the keyboard coming up from beneath it, a little bit of haptic feedback. And I was really surprised at how easy it was to type on. Screen looks gorgeous. Battery life is promising. I'm really curious to see how it works out. And I'm also really curious. I mean, it's like 9.6 millimeters thin. It's 1.5 pounds. And one of the interviews with some of the executives at Lenovo said we went to college campuses and we saw all these kids that were actually using tablets and typing on the screen. And we thought, we can give them something better than that still functions pretty well as a screen. And that pen, which is a combination ink pen and stylish, they kind of worked with Wacom on this. It's like 2,048 pressure levels. So it is a fully, this is something that is fully ready to be used by an artist who draws. So I don't know. It's a neat combination of technologies. I think they've been working on it for like 4 years, something crazy like that. $499. $499 October 2016 for the Android version. $549 October 2016 for the Windows version. So, yeah, I was pretty stoked about it.
That's sooner than I was expecting.
They've been working on it. I understand it for a long time. Kaby Lake also dropped this week, which is the next generation Intel Core processor, the seventh generation Core processor. As Ryan points out in his write-up on PC Power, we have been seeing and reporting on the details of Kaby Lake for quite some time. This is the death knell of the TikTok design philosophy. When we saw it at Intel Developer Forum, they were kind of like, woo, 4K decoding built in, woo, we've got, better 3D graphics. And the quotes from the press release were pretty hysterical. It's like, equivalent to a 5-year-old desktop and capable of playing this video game. Which was, a little less vague than they were about it at Intel Developer Forum, but still means that they are slowly trying to figure out how to catch up to NVIDIA and AMD graphics, or NVIDIA mobile graphics, although NVIDIA took a big jump forward again this summer on their mobile graphics. 14-nanometer process, so they're kind of calling it 14-nanometer plus, because they've improved some of the stuff in the process technology that they claim, is 100% more better for more clock speeds and improved efficiency. Fin profiles changed on the 3D transistors or been improved. And they've apparently, and I'm going to quote Ryan on this, integrated the design process, more tightly integrated the design process with manufacturing. So the end result is about a 12% increase in performance over Skylake, which on one hand doesn't seem like a lot. On the other hand, given how fast this is following on the Skylake, is pretty impressive. Speed shift, some of the diagrams on there, they look like hitting like 3.5 gigahertz in 15 milliseconds compared to a Skylake Core i7 6500U taking 30 milliseconds to hit its peak of 3.1 gigahertz. So the idea that it can go from quiet and sitting in the background to actually doing something useful twice as fast. They've taken HEVC encode and decode out of the main CPU and into discrete processing, or basically discrete chunks of processor on there. VP9 decoding. I'm pretty excited. They're starting with the U and the Y series processors. So basically the low power parts, which means if you've been thinking about buying a notebook, hopefully you didn't buy one yesterday because you want to buy it a couple weeks from now. It's the same chipset as the Skylake, so essentially manufacturers are just going to drop this in and get that 12% bump and the increased 4K performance, because Intel's obsessed with 4K performance.
Well, they've been getting dinged on it for quite a while with, having parts that didn't have any kind of hardware 4K, encode, decode stuff.
Yeah. Definitely more interested in the Core i5 than the Core i3. The Core i3 7100U has no turbo boost, so it's going to run at a fixed 2.4 gigahertz. The Core i5 7200U is going to clock from 2.5 gigahertz to 3.1, and the Core i7 7500U will run at 2.7 up to 3.5 gigahertz. DDR3L or LP DDR3 memory at like 1600 to 1866 megahertz, or DDR4 memory at 2133 megahertz. Don't obsess over DDR3 versus DDR4, because in real world it doesn't really show much of a difference in performance. I'm pretty excited about these. The big question I think that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast are wondering is, will these be in the new Mac Pros, the new MacBook Pros, and what is going to happen in terms of Kaby Lake desktop processors, which we are probably not going to see or hear of before CES. So,
yep.
I'm excited. I'm thrilled. I'm delighted. And I still don't think you may have the top story today, which is Intel dropping the price, dropping the hammer on NVMe prices. So NVMe versus SATA, we're looking at the potential of like a 5x performance, offloading CPU, calculating on the CPU. But NVMe is pricey compared to SATA-based SSDs. What is the story with Intel 600P?
So the 600P is Intel's, it's actually their first M.2 NVMe part to come out. That's especially like for a consumer, right? Previously, anything that was tailored for consumer, for NVMe, was something like a 750 series, which is a really kind of bulky half height, half length PCI card. Definitely not something you could fit into an M.2 form factor. So this thing is tiny. It actually only has 3 flash chips on it. 3, you might notice, is not a power of 2 number like what you might be used to, but that's actually because the this flash is running in TLC mode, which itself gives the chip capacities a non-power of 2 multiple. Each die holds 48 gigabytes, and so you only need 6 of those to get this capacity. So you only need 3 chip packages. They're using a Silicon Motion controller, presumably with Intel's own firmware. Intel has a habit of doing that sort of thing, right? They'll make their own firmware. They've done this in the past with Marvell chips and Sandforce chips as far as controllers go. But here's the thing. Intel appears to have been super, super laser focused on one specific kind of consumer use case for this part. And whatever that workload was, it sure did not involve anything that resembles a typical benchmark that does large amounts of moving stuff around. Because, as you can see actually right there in that shot, the disk transfer rate is kind of bouncing up and down a lot after the first few seconds. You get a few seconds of full speed at the beginning, but then that cache fills up, and this drive just does not like to operate with a full SLC cache. So it's TLC memory that generally goes slow, but it has this particular capacity of it has 6 gigabytes roundabouts of SLC cache. So every time you go to write something to it, usually the cache is empty. It goes straight to that really fast flash memory, and then when the drive is idle, it empties that off to the TLC in the background when you don't really notice, anything is going on. However, most benchmarks that folks have historically ran on SSDs are not, they don't correct for anything like that. They don't correct for the fact that there is a fast cache that you can only use for X amount of time, and then it fills up. So I kind of included all the regular benchmarks in the first couple of pages of results, just to show okay, here's what happens if you have an SSD like this and you try to run regular benchmarks on it. You end up getting really bad results, like that white line that's kind of toggling up and down around the bottom of that chart, trying to almost run into the Velociraptor, which is all the way at the bottom. Yeah. So, just not
as
great.
NVMe as we would like.
Definitely not. Which you might as well just go to the next page, because that's where the real meat and potatoes is. And that is a test that I've been working on and have introduced a couple of reviews back, which is called mixed burst testing. So basically, I looked at what does a BitTorrent download look like when it's going on in the background, and what kind of things do you actually do to your SSD as far as trying to read stuff like application loads or loading levels in a game or whatnot. So if you scroll down a little more there, you'll get to the first chart, which is showing if you were to hit a round of solid-state drives with some different workloads, what actual speed, while the reads are going on and while the writes are going on, what actual speed is happening at that moment in time? Kind of like an instantaneous transfer rate, only while those operations are going on. But the key here is that I'm not applying the workload continuously. It's doing it in more of a behavior where you're actually sitting at your PC, right? Right. You're not doing a game level load continuously 24/7, and that's how historically SSDs would be tested, right? So if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a chart where we're actually comparing results of the speeds of the reads and the writes of various SSDs, again, while those operations are taking place. And you can see there's a chunk at the bottom half there, and those are all SATA SSDs, and SATA SSDs have pretty much kind of topped out as far as what their performance is, right? They're going to go X amount of speed thereabouts, and it's going to be, within a few percent of each other pretty much across the board. However, NVMe parts obviously still have a long way to go as far as, that they are clearly not saturating 4 lanes of PCI Express like they theoretically could. We're nowhere near that. But then again, we're all still on, we're still on the first generation of most of these parts that exist in the market. So we have the 600p at the top there compared to an SSD 750, which is the previous enterprise, hand-me-down kind of part from Intel. And on the reads, the performance actually almost matches an 18-channel controller enterprise part, which is pretty impressive. Yeah, and the writes may not be as fast as an SSD 750, but remember, SSD 750 was based on an enterprise part designed for being like hammered with random writes.
And cost a small fortune.
Yeah, and costs a lot of money, and so it's really hard to match that drive on the speed that it can do its random writes, even if it's doing it intermittently. But note that the 600p actually beat the 950 Pro half a terabyte model in the write speed, the write throughput seen in this particular test. So the key there is that the same amount of data per second is being written to all of the drives in this whole test, but again, simulating like a background download, the faster a drive can write that stuff, the faster it can kind of get it out of the way so that your reads have an ability to go faster and just other stuff in your system has an ability to go faster. So basically, more of the story there for the 600p is that it looks like it's performing, pretty good as far as an NVMe SSD goes, despite what all of the prior benchmarks in this review looked like, which looked really, really bad. Yeah, so the real key there is just as long as you're doing, as long as you're using your system in a regular manner, and think about what you do with your PC normally. How often would you copy more than 6 gigabytes of data to your C drive and do so at a speed of higher than like 120 or 150 meg per second?
I'm probably not the best person to ask about that because I'm moving multiple gigabyte, video files a couple times a week. But for a normal human, I'd say it's pretty unusual.
even if you were moving those video files from, say, a gigabit network attached storage or from even a local hard disk in your system, you're not going to get the data from either of those things fast enough to saturate the cache on this SSD.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so it's just, in probably 99% of the use cases for 99% of the time even, you're just not going to flood this thing with enough data to put it in that case where it looked like it was behaving poorly. So it's all I can say to that is it's a good thing we developed these alternate tests to run on these things, because otherwise it would have just looked like a horrendously horrible drive, and it would have been a poor review. But we were able to look at it with more of an open mind because we had more data points here. So end result here is drives that go as low as 35 cents per gig from Intel for an NVMe M.2 SSD with a 5-year warranty.
Wow.
Which is really, really good. That actually comes in at 60% of the cost per gig of a 950 Pro of the same capacity.
And in case you don't want to do the math on that, that's a 950 Pro M.2 NVMe drive, 256 gigabytes is going to run you $187 on Amazon. The 600p is going to run you $116 on Amazon. A 512 gigabytes 950 Pro is clocking in at $312 on Amazon, which is like 1 terabyte standard SSD territory, and that will be $189 for the 600p, and then the 1 terabyte version that's not available that I suddenly desperately want is going to be $359. This is good.
Yep.
I'm excited.
And the other thing to consider is that since the cost is so low, I would venture to guess that especially power users are probably going to not buy the 256 gig capacity that we tested here. They're probably going to go for the 512 or the 1 terabyte models, and the 512 gig model has a 16 gigabyte cache. The 1 terabyte model has a 32 gigabyte cache. So again, now you would have to write at more than like 150 meg per second for 32 gig worth of data in order to fill that drive's cache and run into the potential performance issues. So I have fed all of the kind of quirks of this drive. Like I kind of generated a little detailed mini report, and I fed that back up to Intel, and they were kind of surprised to see that, considering like they hadn't sent me the sample to test of this drive yet. Because, which is actually another part of that's good for this story, is that it was available the day it was launched. They were at Micro Center right down the street. So, and I didn't have a sample in test. So I just got in my car and went down to Micro Center and just picked one up. You know,
Nice.
for a cheap price, right? Yeah, it's definitely a good thing. I just hope Intel can kind of like work that little bug out of it. If they could, at this price, like without that little issue, this would be almost perfect drive, right? It would just become my default recommendation for an M.2 SSD, because I mean, come on, when you have 60% of the price of a 950 Pro, I can't really argue anymore for a 950 Pro when there's another product that's so much cheaper out there. Yeah.
I am excited. Oh my goodness. Well, we're talking about Intel and SSDs. The P3520, you did a 2 terabyte review, 3D NAND. And again, Intel seems to want to make some money because we're at like 50 cents a gigabyte. Well, you know, they're reducing prices, but they're making things more affordable, which in theory will increase sales. It's a thin line, man.
This is all the result of their 3D NAND. That's where all these low prices are coming from. Because when Intel and Micron decided they wanted to go the route of, okay, we're going to do 3D NAND our way, they decided to optimize more for capacity first over performance. So the performance per die of these things is actually similar to what their previous flash was. So when Samsung came out with their VNAND, it actually performed well in addition to having a little bit more capacity per die. Intel's like, no, we just want way more capacity per die so we can make this stuff as cheaply as possible. And that's the route they went. And now you end up with things like 2 terabyte enterprise SSDs at 50 cents a gig, costing less than $1,000 for 2 terabytes. But 2 terabytes of enterprise class storage, right? Now this is a 5000 series part, which is the lower end, like the 3500 series part. The 3700 series parts are the ones that breathe fire and go super fast all day long, no matter what you hit them with. So it's meant to be more of like a read performance drive than a write performance. It's not meant to just hit it with random writes all day long, stuff like that. But still a pretty good performing drive overall. And we actually introduced a new type of data presentation in this article, which is latency percentile page. And you want to look at those like 5th and 6th charts on that page. And there's a data table like just before it, actually. So keep going. You'll see a data table. And so stop at the data table for a second. And there are things called quality of service, and it's always in terms of just some number of 9s. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but it's just the way that the industry has settled on it. And the idea is, so for the top figure there on the chart, which just says quality of service 99%, that just means that 99% of all the operations that you request from this drive will be less than the latency specified in that table.
Nice.
So this comes into play for you're trying to build enterprise servers. You have to make sure that you can assure a quality of service. In other words, the service being like how fast does it respond to things. And so it's just a spec that system builders in the enterprise space have to design around, right? Their systems are all kind of based on those numbers. And sometimes that manufacturer will present those like a different number of 9s. In other words, there's what's called 4 9s just below that in that table, which is 99.99%. So that's being even more picky about how many IOs and what percentage of them have to be faster than that spec that they list. The problem is it's really hard for reviewers to validate that kind of thing because there's no benchmarks out there that just spit out this kind of data. It's something that you have to have a lot of data points at your disposal and comb through and apply math to and get results from. Just so happens, that's the thing I've been working on for the past year, right? The latency percentile results. So if you scroll down a little bit, you will see a chart with X's marked on them. And actually it has increments, major increments on the vertical axis there, which is just the varying number of 9. And then for 99% and 99.99%, like I've just marked off where Intel spec is in the appropriate color. And then you can compare the line. And it's not just a point on a line. Like I'm giving you the whole thing from 0 all the way up to 5 9s percentile. And I can do that because we have so much data at our disposal. We can actually make like a nice smooth looking line out of that. And it's actually not a smooth line as far as Excel goes. Like it just looks smooth because there's so many dang data points on the line. So good stuff. We're able to like confirm that, you know, this SSD is performing better than its spec. And then if you go one more table down to the reads, same kind of deal. In this case, the drive was performing very close or equal to its spec. And funny story about these results is I actually collaborated with Intel showing them these results, and they actually tweaked their draft version of the spec a little bit to better match what I was seeing even in these results. So I came up with this whole data table thing on account of like wanting to be able to validate what Intel put in their data sheets better. And now I've come completely full circle by now I'm, you know, my results are kind of feeding into the to the workflow and turning into things that can actually affect, you know, how they rate them, which is pretty cool. You know, makes me feel a little bit more accomplished than just doing reviews, right?
Something else that came out while we're talking about SSDs and storage is an article. Digitimes. Basically, the Digitime breaks a lot of the stories, comes out of China. A lot of the stories come out of the chip side of the industry. But the DRAM exchange predicts that over half of all laptops will use an SSD for storage by 2018. Because apparently SSDs prices for OEMs have stabilized for the first time, and that prices are relatively stable, although it does look like there's going to be some issues this year with NAND supplies. And this is the second version of this story I've heard. One that came out at IDF, and Ryan and I were talking about it, was now the company this individual works for sells memory, so obviously they have some interest in selling memory. But one of the things they pointed out, there are so many Chinese cell phone manufacturers that are throwing scads of memory, DDR4 memory, at main system memory on phones and storage on phones, that there's a developing DDR4 shortage. And in this case, we are seeing that there may be some issues where NAND manufacturing capacity will not be up to snuff for SSD demands, which is, I think, probably something that Micron's been dreaming about for years now.
They do. A lot of people do keep calling it a shortage, but a shortage like almost implies that the supply level is dropping. But that's actually not what the case here. Here, the demand is skyrocketing, and they just can't keep up with the supply, like with the increasing supply. So yeah, it's very much very much a thing. I just hope the prices stay down. That's all I say. All I can say.
It's good to be a memory manufacturer right now.
Yeah,
it's also good to.
At Flash Memory Summit, one of the major tidbits was that within 2 years in the enterprise space, Flash is expected to surpass any kind of quote-unquote fast hard drives, like 10K RPM, 15K RPM SAS hard drives. Within 2 years, they're just expecting like they're going to become the hard drives are going to become so scarce in that space that the prices are just going to start going up because like it's just harder to make them in a lower volume. And then that's just going to be the tipping point where everybody just goes up, forget about that spinning disk for, you know, our front end kind of server. We're just going to use Flash.
It's crazy talk. Oh my goodness. Yeah. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell, one of which is guarding the door behind which Mr. Malventano is speaking right now. Another one of which is guarding the home of my usual regular co-host, Ryan Schrout. Ring Video Doorbell has been proven to stop burglaries before they happen by allowing you, yes, you, to see and speak to anyone approaching your door using your smart homes. This is serious, people. There's a home burglary every 13 seconds. Most burglaries happen in broad daylight. Burglars will ring the doorbell to make sure you're away before breaking in. It's a pretty simple process. You know, they look to see if somebody's there. They kick in the door. They get the stuff. They go. Now Ring is using their advanced motion detection technology to protect your entire property with their Ring of Security kits. Kits include a Ring Video Doorbell. It may include a stick-up cam, solar panel chime, and or solar security sign. Pro kits include a Slim Video Doorbell Pro with crystal clear 1080p HD video and night vision, hardwired so it never needs to charge. The wireless and weatherproof HD stick-up cam keeps an eye on other parts of your property and allows you to hear and speak to visitors with two-way talk. Just plug the chime into any standard power outlet to know when you have a visitor, even if your phone is in another room. and the illuminated solar security sign deters intruders before they get to your door. The Ring Video Doorbell and Stick-Up Cam install in just minutes. Ryan has talked about how easy it was to get the Ring Video Doorbell up and running. Working together, they provide 24/7 monitoring of your entire home, whether you're in the living room or thousands of miles away. My co-host Ryan is not here right now. Huge fan of Ring. Uses one at work. Uses one at home. It's cool, man. He can basically be like, oh, the UPS guys at the door at work, recognize him, tell him to leave the box, tell him to hold it till later, see what's going on in his home, keep things under control when he's not around. It's good stuff. And you can join the million of homeowners who protect their home with Ring for a limited time this week in Computer Hardware. Listeners can get up to $150 off one of the Ring of Security kits. Go to ring.com/Twitch. That's ring.com/TWiCH. We want to thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh my goodness. USB Type-C, the exciting cable, the cable that could charge laptops and connect small devices to your computer and save children and move science forward, making the planet a safer place, is not always that safe. Something we were talking about this on Tech Thing this week. One of our viewers pointed out, Benson the Young, who has been part of the Pixel team at Google, who kind of became obsessed with testing USB Type-C cords and figuring out which ones worked and which one didn't. Was spreading the word that Nathan Kay discovered the Anchor Powerline USB-C cable model A8185011 can, well, basically, if you charge your laptop with it and then turn around and use it to charge your phone, it can actually overpower your phone, right? So, that basically means the RP pull down can be doubled, and you can fry your phone. That's the short version of it. It's bad. On the upside, Anchor is doing a no questions asked replace policy. Contact them. They'll send you out a new cable. They just want you to destroy the old cable. But beware. And if you haven't heard of Benson Leung, his Google Plus page has lots and lots of information on the best functioning and safest USB-C cables. So, oh my goodness. Are you excited about the eye tracking tech in the new G-Sync monitors from Acer, sir?
I have not tried it myself. I mean, it sounds cool, but I'm not on the bandwagon yet, I guess. I do really like Acer's G-Sync gaming monitors in the first place, like even without the eye tracking. Right. I have within eyesight of me here in the office, I have three different versions of those panels of the Acer G-Sync panels. So
has G-Sync won as far as you're concerned?
Well, it just depends on what GPUs you happen to be using. So, right. I mean, you can get FreeSync panels for cheaper, if you're on AMD GPUs, but until NVIDIA finally caves and tries to allow FreeSync use on their, GTX video cards, well, might not be a thing. But yeah, one of those panels is like 240 hertz refresh rate. It is insane. It's only 1080p while it's doing that, of course, but still, that is pretty crazy refresh rate for a display. And it's a good thing it's 1080p because I challenge most video card setups to try to even hit 240 frames per second, unless they're at 1080p. But yeah, they've got so 1080p panel. I think that's the one that's curved. Also, I'm trying to remember which one is what in those listings. Yeah, 1080p 144 hertz. That's curved, 27 inch. Then there is a 25 inch flat screen, 1080p 240 hertz, and then there's 27 inch 25 by 14 165 hertz, which is actually similar to the Predator I have sitting right in front of me. So they've made previous versions of most of those panels in that list that did not do this eye tracking, and now they have another variant of them all that has this technology on it. But Ryan's described pretty cool stuff as far as like what the technology can do. It has to be the game or whatever it is you're doing has to be aware of the tech and actually use it.
It's kind of
but it could
trippy
do-
because you look at an area of the screen and like you blink or you do something and things happen, which is a little Jetsons.
Yeah, I mean,
and a little
it could
space
do
age.
stuff. You could have a scene in the game where they're trying to emulate like depth of field, where you have some stuff in the background and something in the foreground, and actually focused differently. And this tech can pay attention to where you're looking on the screen, and then the game engine can bring whatever that region is into focus, right? Like if you're focusing near or focusing far. Or there's other applications of it where you can actually use that technology to do the aiming of like where you're gonna go to, or shoot or whatever. Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Exciting. The other thing that came out from Acer was the Predator 21X curved screen gaming notebook. Some less than flattering things have been written about this in various parts of the interwebs. This is, well, just look at it. It's huge.
Yeah, it's a pretty big. It's a pretty big machine.
A full-size keyboard embedded underneath. A full-size keyboard, which is, of course, offset to the left, which drives me insane about using keyboards with number pads on laptops. And this crazy area underneath it with a Sea Dragon kind of leaping at you underneath this giant curved screen. Dual NVIDIA GTX 1080 GPUs and SLI, Intel 7th generation Kaby Lake processor. That screen, that crazy curved screen, is 2560 by 1080p. Or 2560 by 1080, 21-inch screens. But if you look at that, it's massive. This also has the Tobii eye tracking technology built in. The keyboard has Cherry MX key switches. A really interesting and or peculiar, that keypad can be flipped over and turned into a, quote, precision touchpad, a 5-fan cooling system, which we were looking at just a second ago. Pricing and availability and, oh yes, weight have not been announced yet. I have the feeling that this thing may not, if you're traveling Spirit, you may not be allowed to take this on the plane without buying a carry-on bag. I got that feeling.
Yeah.
I also
insane.
cannot imagine how much this is going to cost. Basically, 4.2 sound system, 4 DDR4 slots that will handle up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, which probably makes it really tempting for people to think of as a workstation. The thing looks like it's about 3 or 4 inches thick. Oh, wait, I finally have it. 8 kilograms. So if a kilogram's 2.2 pounds, that is a
like 14 pounds.
17.6 pound laptop.
Oh, that's 17 pounds. That's all.
A mere 17 pounds. So that happened. That's one of the things that came out of IFA this week.
That's just crazy.
Ready for VR.
I'm afraid to know the price. I'm really afraid to know the price of that thing, because that's just like, yeah. How much stuff can you cram into that poor laptop?
It's going to be pricey, I think, to say the very least. Significantly less pricey, but probably still a bit expensive for the average micro SD card buyer. Samsung's finally released a 256 gigabyte Samsung Evo Plus micro SD card. This is good. This is a U3 class card. So if you're trying to do 4K recording, this is good to go. MSRP on this is $250, which is expensive. Micro SD cards, as you increase capacity, get really expensive really, really fast.
Yep.
This is the
you pretty much you pretty much absolutely need to, like, don't get this unless you have something that can write at U3 speeds. Like, in other words, these are SD cards that actually have 2 rows of pins on them because they need more contacts to be able to transfer data that quickly. Like, it's a little bit deceptive because you can't see the bottom of the cards in that particular picture. But most of your hardware that you have doesn't have that interface. Like, so these cards will have to run in like a backwards compatibility mode and actually run slower than they're rated for if you're plugging them into those things. So
to put this into context right now, 128 gigabyte micro SD XC cards, UHS-1 cards, are down to like $40 from SanDisk, $38 from
Yep.
like a Samsung 128 gigabyte Samsung Evo Plus is $38 now. So. And it looks like Patriot. It's got a 200 gigabyte card. SanDisk is a 200 gigabyte card. Part of the thing is you need to make sure your device will actually recognize, the card in question too, because micro SD is controlled by the controller in the device as to whether or not it can actually recognize the capacity of what's been put inside of it, the micro SD card. So there's nothing more painful than buying, an $85, 256 gigabyte card and finding out that you can't actually read it. Or I should say a $98 or $78 200 gigabyte card, because the cheapest 256 gigabyte card I've seen out there is still clocking in at $200. So
you should actually be okay as long as you have a thing that can read over 32 gig. Chances are you're good all the way up to 2 terabytes.
Really?
Because that's just the SDXC standard, which kind of sits off to the side of all of the actual speed grades that the cards can go. Right.
I have an audio player that I now want to check that out on, because it would be nice to have like 500 gigabytes of storage or 400 gigabytes of storage inside of it, but
yeah, if it can read, if it can go more than 32, so basically if a 64 gig card will work in it, it should work up to 2 terabytes. Now the speeds are a different, but the speeds are a different animal, right?
Right.
So the speed grades is more of the physical part of the spec than the logical or the partitioning part of the spec. So for that, it's just a matter of you have U1, which is about as fast as you can push a single row of pin on the backside SD card, or U3, which requires it's actually, hold on, I don't know if that's UHS 1 or 2 on that card, because as our VJ has expertly pulled up as my article that talks about this stuff. Funny how that works.
SD card speed classes, grades, bus modes, and file systems explained, which is a delightful read by Mr. Malventano from October 2015. All still entirely as valid now as it was then.
It actually is. And I think, I'm not sure if this card is UHS 2 or not from what's being talked about in that other news piece. But anyway, I would say go to that, that article and check it out even further, and you can get all the details you possibly want to know about that before we go spending a lot of money on a micro SD card. That's smaller than a penny.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, measure twice, cut once on this, because you don't want to own a card. Well, you can return the card, I suppose, but you don't want to buy a card that you can't actually run inside of any of your devices, at least not at that kind of price. Oh, my goodness. iFixit.com, people. We love them. They help us fix our stuff. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you, ladies and gentlemen, by iFixit. Your complete DIY electronics repair solution, from their over 21,000 free step-by-step repair guides, more than 80,000 solutions, to their huge inventory of replacement parts and tools with lifetime warranty. iFixit has got your repair needs covered. Today we're talking about their latest and greatest, the all-new ProTech toolkit. There is one in the desk behind me right now. There is one in my workbench at home. I gave one to my wife. It is gorgeous. They took the classic all ProTech toolkit, and they thought, how can we make this easier to use? How can we keep it rugged? How can we keep it strong? The first thing they did is the new 64-bit driver kit. They redesigned the wrap, right? They put a big old wrap around it like they did in the past, but they put a new 64-bit driver kit inside of there, an extra 10 bits, a more durable case. There's no hinges to break. There's no latches to break. You don't have to pull it out of the slider and find the latch and get it open and then dig the screws out and then drop the little 5-bit, because they basically put them all in this big giant container that holds all the bits in one place. It's magnetically held onto the tool roll, so you can grab it and pull it off of there. The cover is magnetically held on. A sheet magnet holds it in place. I use it to I pull the bit kit off and use the sheet magnet to hold parts when I'm pulling stuff apart. There it is. You can see those bits right there. A really nice a new driver, a swivel top precision driver, a flex extension for those screws that are buried in the corner of the case that you can't quite get the driver to. Some nice electrostatic discharge safe tweezers, a whole bunch of plastic opening tools, picks, spudgers, metal spudgers, iFixit's Jimmy pry tool, which I recently used to pry open a keyboard that did not want to come open. I can highly recommend that. It's good stuff. And if you're old school, an ESD safety strap to make sure you don't destroy your job with static shock. And I'd probably be more about, there it is, right up there in the corner, about those safety straps if I lived in a part of the country with more electrostatic electricity from the long winters. Spudgers, there it is. There's the ESD strap, which, you know, if I had carpets in my house, I'd probably be more worried about this. The angled tweezers are incredibly useful. And that, kids, is what you use if you want to get your screen off of your phone. So many tools, so useful, such a great place to start if you're trying to fix electronics. Backed by iFixit's lifetime warranty. Buy it because it's awesome, or don't. You still get free access to all the free repair sources on iFixit.com, which is just one more reason iFixit is awesome. They're making the knowledge about how to get electronics open and a whole lot of other stuff. How to repair it. They're giving away the knowledge for free, people. Hey, sound like a good idea? You should probably be thinking about it right now. Grab an all-new Pro Tech Toolkit. Get going on your next fix, hack, or build. Just head over to iFixit.com/twit and use the code TWiCH, TWiCH, at checkout. You're going to save $5 off your purchase of $10 or more. We want to thank iFixit for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. iFixit.com/twit, and the code you want to use is TWiCH. Save some money, whether you're buying parts or the All-Pro Tech Toolkit, one of the other delightful pieces of hardware that's available up at iFixit.com. And we want to thank them for their continued support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh, man. Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, Battlefield 1 beta. New drivers from both NVIDIA and AMD. So 372.70 is the Battlefield 1 beta driver on GeForce, and then Radeon 16.8.3. Their hot fix, again, all about Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, and Battlefield 1. So this is good stuff.
Glad to see an NVIDIA and AMD driver come out at the same time.
It's crazy. Although the AMD driver adds crossfire profiles for both games, Jeremy writes up, and fixes an unfortunate bug from the previous release, which occasionally caused a static, albeit colorful screen over the top of your game. Apparently, the gaming evolved overlay launch problem still exists, as does the workaround. So, and Jeremy notes, so when he talks about the NVIDIA driver, if you're testing a new Battlefield, quote, you should consider updating, or one would suppose the bug reports submitted using this driver will be more beneficial to the developers than an older release. You know the drill. Grab them from GeForce.com or NVIDIA.com. Update your drivers, people. You'll live longer. GDDR6 memory is going to arrive on GPUs in 2018. Are you surprised? I mean,
no. I mean, we knew it was coming. It's just a matter of when.
Did a lot of people think it was going to be 2017?
Well, a lot of people did think, and now they don't, I guess. Because that's not when it's probably going to come. It's probably a year after that. But honestly, I mean, you know, graphics memory is pretty dang fast already. Like, this stuff, the speed, it was ridiculous. Like, we were doing the math last night on the podcast, and, like, this RAM here, this GDDR6, can go so quick compared to the capacity of each chip that, like, you can read or write the whole contents of the chip in, like, a fraction of a second.
Right.
Like, the whole thing. It's just like, yep, just read all my memory. You know, just did it again. Okay. You want to write to the whole thing? Yep. Okay, that's done too. You know, it's just like, it's basically you're talking near instantaneous.
I can do this all day, says the memory chip.
Basically, yeah. It's because the bus is so wide that, you know, it's just able to go so dang fast and so many channels at the same time. So yeah, it's like 786 gigabytes per second on a 384-bit wide memory bus, up from 12 gigabytes per second from GDDR5 memory launched earlier this year by Micron. That seems... I feel like that should be like at least 128, not 12 gigabits per second, but maybe I'm reading the Acquirer wrong here. Yeah, and the chip only has like 4 or 8 gigabytes of capacity. So, you know, You're just flying through all the data on the chip. Very cool.
There you have it. Huawei Mate 8 smartphone review. Enter the Kirin 950. In case you didn't pick it up on that last segment, we're delighted that GDDR6 is coming, but we don't seem to particularly need it just yet. Ryan got to pick this up at a Huawei event. Sebastian Peak wrote it up. This is a good-looking phone.
Yeah.
You know, like we talked about, it's got the Mate 8 8-core processor inside of it, which is a 4X ARM Cortex A72 or 4 ARM Cortex A72 cores clocked at 2.3 gigahertz. 4 ARM Cortex A53 cores clocked at up to 1.8 gigahertz. Memory is 3 gigabytes on the sample they tested. 32 gigabytes of storage, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and 64 gigabytes of storage is also available. You know, from what I'm hearing from Sebastian and other places, it feels and looks great. Metal, steel, 6-inch 1920 by 1080 display. That's 368 pixels per inch. Gorilla Glass 4 protecting it. 16 megapixel rear camera, f2.0. So not maybe the best low light camera we're seeing right now, but still very respectable. Autofocus, dual tone flash, 1080p 60 video. You know, 4G LTE, dual band 802.11 AC, which I think is freaking awesome. USB or micro USB 2.0. I still dream of seeing USB 3.0 on phones, but I'm going to be dreaming for a while. What's kind of crazy about this is you know, the specs put it, you know, it's like a premium class phone for $489. 10 hours of battery life on PC Mark's work battery test, which is pretty good. It's simple. It's clean. You know, there's a UI over Android 6.0, which doesn't seem to be too bad. Not the best camera for the money, and there's a lot of $400 Android phones coming out this fall that are kind of competing in that $300 to $500 space. Display looks awesome, Sebastian says. Snappy UI, excellent build quality, all-day battery life, excellent sound, but a below-average camera for the money. So that's kind of a bummer. Silver award from PC perspective, but pretty respectable effort from Huawei.
Yeah. Pretty looking phone, definitely.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. So many phones coming out.
And so many phone processors coming out.
Yeah, Qualcomm's dropped the Snapdragon 821.
Mm-hmm.
You've been looking at this one? Are you following the Snapdragon processor progress?
I do not follow the Snapdragon lineage as well as I would like to, unfortunately. But you know, it's just the next version of the chip, right? They're claiming devices should be able to boot up 10% faster, application times 10% faster, and you know, it sounds like it's yet another speedier iteration on what was already out there, right? You know, I mean, it's just, you know, it's kind of like they're doing a TikTok, right? Like, yeah, we'll just optimize this a little more and make this go a little faster.
Yeah,
which is
good. And it seems natural. I mean, Snapdragon's in most of the tier 1 phones right now. Snapdragon 821. Yeah, yay. Okay, so we're not that excited about that. Samsung mobile recovery suffers blow as Galaxy Notes, quote, catch fire, unquote. Strange little Reuters article, but what they're basically saying is that Note supplies are thin. Because Samsung was getting reports of exploding batteries, so they had to delay shipments of Galaxy Note 7 smartphones, and investors drove the stock to the floor, especially because right now we expect next week to hear the word on the next generation iPhones, right? September 7th is next Wednesday, so less than a week at this point. I am curious to see what happens, you know, with the new iPhone, and also what happens with Samsung. Because it seems like they're having kind of a tough summer. You know, I don't know. True. You know, and exploding batteries generally are considered bad. Bad.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. PlayStation Now arriving on Windows 7, 8.1, and 10. Probably not going to influence you to buy a new gaming CPU, but Are you excited? Are you playing it? Did you have a stash of PlayStation games that you've been longing to play on your PC?
I mean, I do have a stack of PS2 games.
Uh-huh.
I have a few PS3. I've kind of been out of that for a while. I haven't set up a PlayStation console in my own home for several years now. Yeah,
But
I know,
you've got a
sacrilege.
radically awesome garage.
Well, it's true. Yeah. You know, I just do the PC Master Race stuff mostly these days for my own personal gaming.
Seems reasonable. Basically, a whole bunch of PlayStation 3 titles, very similar to On Live. They're going to be streamed, U.S. and Canada supported. Not sure if any other countries are going to get that. You will need a DualShock 4 controller, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out. 7-day trial. 1 month for $20, 12 months prepaid is $99. So obviously they want you to prepay for a year because it's $240 if you do it by month, or $100 if you pay it for a year in advance. So Sony looking for green, which Sony has been known to do. One last thought before we go, peeking over the edge. 10 gigabit Ethernet NIC in Asus's latest X99 E-10G WS motherboard. Wow. So if you're
finally,
right? Even if you're in a workstation world,
remember it was kind of a big deal when like gigabit built into a motherboard, and it was like, wow, you can get gigabit in your motherboard. That's amazing. Yeah. And 10 gig is taking a little longer to catch on. It's more expensive, obviously. Like, I mean, you can find Intel 10 gigabit base T, meaning like regular copper, connection. They usually come in like a dual port NIC that you plug in, and you can find them for around 140, 160 bucks, I think now.
It's
for
crazy.
One of those NICs. It's still pricey. Still pricey, but you're talking what?
I was gonna say, hold on that shot right there. 8 DIMM slots. It'll support everything through it'll support not just Core i7 processors, but Intel Xeon, the E5 1600, all the way up through like the E5 2600 V4 series CPUs. It's got support for ECC memory if you have a compatible CPU. 4-way SLI, 4-way Crossfire technology built in. 7 PCI Express 3.0 / 2.0 slots. I mean, it's just crazy, like quad by 16 or 7/16 by 8 by 8 by 8 by 8 by 8 by 8 by 8. It's just out of control, man. A U.2 connector, should you be able to find a U.2 SSD out there?
SSD, yeah.
Well,
it's a workstation board. I wouldn't be surprised if someone was throwing like a really expensive like Micron Enterprises at the SSD thing.
That's true.
Because
why not?
But this board is probably going to run, even aside from all of the other extra bells and whistles on the thing, it's probably going to run you like an extra 80 to 100 bucks over what it would normally cost just for that 10 gig, because it has dual 10 gig NIC support built in. And given that the cheapest end card you can get is runs at around 150 or so, it's going to add some cost to the price of that board. But that is just a beast of a workstation board, though. That's throw everything you possibly, every bit of hardware you have, just plug into that all at once, and it will just do all the things, right?
And we have no idea what it's going to cost, but I suspect it is not going to be cheap, to say the least.
I think someone in the comments talked about it. I just forgot what it was going for. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you're talking like $400 or $500 easy for that board, probably. So
a non-trivial expense. Let's just call it.
Yeah, a non-trivial amount of money. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Anything coming up on PC Per you can tease us about?
Ryan's on travel, and I'm working on a few things, but everything that's under NDA so far, so can't talk about it until it comes out. But everybody's working on stuff, so keep checking the site, and we'll keep putting more stuff on the site as we're allowed to talk about the stuff.
That sounds like a plan, man.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I finally got to write up Egg's wireless, Kef's Egg wireless digital musical system. We got a new Android TV box, the MTech Gem, that Shannon got hands on with. It's Android TV. It's gaming. Costs half as much. Costs half as much as an NVIDIA Shield. Whether or not it lives up to that level of performance, I'll make you watch the show to see. And we've got some keyboards coming up, and we finally got some of the one of the Logitech's Pop home control buttons, home automation control buttons in. The idea is that you basically hit a button and you can like turn on the lights, turn off the lights, turn on the lights, roll the video screen, start the music, release the hounds. I'll be curious to see how well it works in the real world. And I finally got in the standard $200 version of the Amplify wireless router, and we're going to see how that compares to the $350 HD and the even more expensive Eero wireless mesh networking system. I will say, though, I need to get it hooked back up in my house because I really liked being able to use full AC performance in the far corner of my house, which did not work in the past. So faster Wi-Fi, always a plus. At Malventano on Twitter, I'm at Patrick Norton. At Ryan Shrout, who's not here right now, is also available on the Twitter, at least when he's checking it. PCPer.com is the website for more of Allyn's work. You can find me at techthing.com or avxl.com. And we want to thank you for listening to this fine blended edition of This Week in Computer Hardware. And thank you so much. If you want to find more of our episodes, twit.tv/TWiCH, twit.tv/Twitch is the place to go. And we will see you next week on This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Allyn Malventano.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.